Take it away, Kevin.
Thank you, Nina. Thanks a lot. It's great to be back for another AIM webinar. Welcome aboard, everybody. This time, as Nina said, the final part, part 3 in our ongoing series with our friends from Cadence Solutions, talking about records management out of the box with Microsoft 365. Is it a myth or is it a reality? Look, effective records management is a must for organizations to manage the regulatory, legal, and operational requirements for records and content. We know that, but now more than ever, it's critical for organizations to have a modern records management program in place, not one that was designed originally for paper, but one that is designed to manage today's world of content and the nearly infinite amounts of digital information that organizations must deal with today. And as regulatory laws and expectations continue to evolve and cyber threats become increasingly complex and sophisticated, a modern and well-thought records management and information governance program becomes only more imperative. As a result, many organizations are looking at Microsoft 365 as a platform for records management. After all, as a business platform, M365 has become nearly ubiquitous across industries, but does it provide the needed records management capabilities? And if so, how do we use them effectively? Well, that's what we're going to be exploring in today's webinar. We'll examine the capabilities of Microsoft Purview and see how it's possible to have a complete records management program out of the box. We'll learn about creation of retention labels via the Compliance Center file plan, applying automatic records retention to SharePoint content with Purview, and tips and tricks for records management in Microsoft 365 without third-party add-ons. So get ready for another informative webinar as we explore the real world of records management techniques within Microsoft 365. But before I introduce our guest today, I do want to say again that we want to hear from you too. Please feel free to chat together in the chat feature. And if you have a question for our guest today, please enter it into the Q&A feature. That's where I'll be watching, and we'll have some time later in the program for your questions. So with all of that said, let's bring our guest expert aboard today, Jordan Uterhagen. Jordan, are you with us?
I am, Kevin. Hello.
There you are. Jordan Uterhagen is Managing Director of Cadence Solutions. He's an expert in Microsoft 365. Jordan and his team have completed more than 80 implementations across North America in a variety of industries, including energy, utilities, financial services, insurance, the public sector. So we're pleased to have him with us today. So Jordan, welcome aboard. Tell us more about Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Purview as a platform for records management.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that have tuned in, this is the third partner series, the final part of going through the kind of journey and different ways we can utilize out-of-the-box tools from Microsoft 365 to accomplish RM and IM tasks. So I'm going to steal the screen share there from Nina, I believe, who has control. And I will get started. So let me know if everything's looking okay there, Kevin.
That is looking great. Thank you, Jordan.
Excellent. So if you've been along for the journey, you know who we are. I'm not going to go into the whole sales pitch on new cadences. We're a Microsoft partner. We're a content AI partner specifically, which is the content services boutique partner offering that you need to be invited to from Microsoft. So that is the I guess the status we have with the mothership there. In terms of going into the presentation today, the one thing I want to focus on, and the one thing we get asked constantly about, is licensing. The licensing, I guess, matrix from Microsoft is very complex, and that ends up becoming a downstream issue when you go to perform an RM or IM project, because you may not be adequately licensed at the level you need for the functionality you require. So the demonstration today will all be based on E5 Office 365 or O365 licensing. So there is M365 licensing, there is O365 licensing. Essentially, the short story between both of those is M365 gives you more corporate things. Windows licensing gives you a lot of security, more features like Windows Defender and things that are rolled out more from an IT capacity. The key when we go through and roll out a records management project is it really comes down to one thing for users. Where do I put my stuff? That's all they really need to know. When they put their stuff in the location, in this instance, a document library and a SharePoint site, you need it to inherit the retention label onto the content, the documents that are turning into records when they put their stuff in that place. E5 is the capability to do that underneath Microsoft. If you have E3 and you're a large organization, and by no means will you be upgrading to E5, you can go get the information protect and govern add-on license for those users that will be participating in records management. So this is a key question we get all the time in discovery calls when we were at a bunch of different conferences the last couple of weeks with AIIM and M365 conferences. What license do I need? And one of our questions that's going to pop up here shortly is essentially, what license do you have today? So if you can launch that poll, Nina.
Absolutely. Launching. Like Jordan said, the question is, are you aware of what M365 license you have today? Yes, I have E5. Yes, I have E3, or no idea.
So while that poll is being populated, the main one we're looking for here from a records perspective is the ability to go through and apply retention policies automatically onto content. So that's either through an inheritance principle. We don't really want users, of course, to manually tag things. They're going to tag wrong in terms of picking a retention label. We want to push that down with an inheritance side of things.
Okay, we'll be closing the poll shortly, so hurry up and vote. Okay, so the results are in, and we have 46% say yes, they have E5, 33% say they have E3, and 21% say they have no idea.
I actually think that's pretty good for results in terms of capability and the readiness in order to go and implement some of the things I'm going to show off today. So if there's any questions you have on these kinds of things, I have a few folks in the chat that are going to answer those on the fly. So you can put your questions in the Q&A and you'll see responses from my team there. So anything else that's further, I have some contact information at the end where we can take away more of the deeper thought questions. So what I'm going to go through and show today is a couple of the basics. If you're really new to Purview, this will be something that you can take away. We're going to go through and create a retention label via the Compliance Center, basically via the file plan. We're going to auto label some content based on a sensitivity label. And the example here is a social security number ends up in a document that's in the system. It's a document you weren't aware would be sensitive, and we want the system to auto label and tag that as PII. So I'll show off that example. That subsequently runs some things for data loss prevention in terms of not being able to share the document and a few other, kind of downstream function restrictions that come through. And then I'll show off kind of the disposition review side of things. We've done a number of these webinars with AIIM. There's a ton of these hosted on AIIM's site as well as Cadence's site if you want to go back and replay some things. So there's a lot of different functionality. We tried to keep this one kind of separate and not repeating from what we've done in the past. So I'll just jump over to the screen share here and we'll go through kind of setting up the file plan. And there's one thing that's really changed in the last year with it that I'm going to show off here that really changed the way Purview can compete with other record systems. So I'm in Purview here. I'm in as the global administrator. You can also go in here as the compliance administrator to go and configure these kind of functions. You can change your cards and everything if you want to see a dashboard like here. This is one of our environments we use for all of our demonstrations. Inside of the records management side of things, we're going to go into the file plan area and we're going to go and create a new label. So you can see we have a number of different labels in here, different functions, departments, disposition types, and I'll cover this in a few seconds as well. So going into creating a label, we'll just name it. If we want to put in the description, again, I encourage the description, but I discourage the users picking a label, which is the intent of the description. We want to enforce that through an inheritance model down to the users. So they're just basically being taught through change management where to put their things, and the retention label is automatically being put on the content, whether it's where they put their things or what is inside of the actual document. We can go through, and if you don't want to list out any kind of citations, the business function, the authority type in here, you can really build out your file plan in here. We have a mechanism to actually import your file plan into Purview as well. So if you do have that well documented in an Excel or a CSV, that is something we can upload into Purview. You don't have to go through and click through this time and time again to publish those labels and create those labels. As we go through and create the label, there's a couple different things here, and I always kind of laugh at the last one there, but we'll go top down. We can retain the items forever or for a specific period. Very common, of course, in records management. We can enforce actions after a specific period. So we don't want to retain it. We want to, decide whether this should be deleted or relabeled, or we can just kind of lazily label the items and not really retain them, which really isn't the point of records management. I would just kind of accomplish that with maybe some metadata fields. So I'm going to go through for the first one here and retain items forever or a specific period. And I know 7 years is a sore spot with records managers, so we'll just arbitrarily change this to 5 years. And we can start the retention period based on an event that we've configured in the system. So we may end up with termination dates if we're looking at contracts. If we're looking at maybe something in the benefit space, it could be a benefit year, and we can build out all these different event types so that we can actually go through and connect the pieces of that case closure style of records management. And that's the piece that's really the trick in Purview, is getting that case closure to work. It works very well with the Great Date Plus, the base records management functions. But when you get into that dynamic closure, there are a couple tips and tricks you have to go through here to make it work, and that is on the event type side of things. So let's say we're going to do a termination date plus 10 years. And we want to go through and retain the items even if a user deletes this. Now, if you're not familiar with this, there is something called the preservation hold library inside of SharePoint. And what that'll do is you can actually let your user delete, in air quotes, the document out of the system, and it'll actually be kept in what's flagged here as a secure location. That secure location is the preservation hold library. And that library is an area that you can go and perform your disposition later on it. So if a user wants to go through and kind of do a cleanup activity where they don't want to see some of the legacy archived or stuff that should have been archived, they can go through and remove it, and it will sit in the preservation hold library. That still lets you go through e-discovery if you're going through a legal hold or anything. If we select that options here, so we'll say retain the items even if a user deletes it, we can do a couple of different things. So the usual things are we want to delete this automatically. We want to start a disposition review. And this, for clarity, is an out-of-the-box Purview disposition review. And I'll show that in a few seconds as well. In that, that's going through and assigning the reviewers, assigning the approvers, and assigning the stages in here to go through and actually perform the approval before destruction of that. One of the things that there was a struggle with from Purview in the past was the ability to dynamically do that based on some content. So they've added a new feature here I'll show off in a second. The other one is you can change a label. So if you do have one of those retention schedules that's maybe a little more old school, where you have superseded and obsolete, you have active, semi-active, archived, and then you're going through the destruction and you're not really having a lot of success getting the new retention schedule approved, you can actually start to daisy chain labels to each other. So we can start with active, we can move it to inactive. When we move it to inactive, we can do something else with the content. We want to move it sites, move it libraries, tag it differently, lock it down. That's all possible out of that. Now, the feature they released recently within the last 3 to 6 months was the ability to run a Power Automate flow when the retention periods hit. This is what we've been waiting for as an implementer for quite a long time. This essentially just lets you tie your end state to a Power Automate workflow that you've created. And now You can do anything you like inside your organization. If you want to go based on contract value for approvals, if you need to go to legal, then maybe a state regulatory body for approval and then back, you can do that within Power Automate, whether that's inside of your tenant or communicating outside maybe via emails. But you can start to assign those explicit tasks as opposed to the ability to do that with just a standard disposition review where every disposition reviewer needs to be a user in your tenant. So the Power Automate flow really opens up a lot of capability and flexibility in doing that approval at the end of the retention cycle. This matches other systems like OpenText, OnBase in their records capability. So we can review and finish and create the label if we like. After we've created the label, we have to go through and actually publish the label. We can publish that label to a number of different locations. So we're going to make this available in SharePoint and OneDrive as well. And this label can go out and we can publish it. We can turn this on for mailboxes in this instance. Publishing can take up to a week. So if you're rolling something out, just be cautious of that. If you're not selecting as many locations, meaning mailboxes, OneDrive, and SharePoint, it does publish a lot faster in our experience. So usually within the same day, but they're going to leave that 1 week caveat on there. So jumping out of that and jumping more into my nemesis of we need to push the labels down to the users. We have the ability to go into a library and actually set a label. Now, this is one of those E5 functionalities where if we're going into a library, we can actually set apply label to items in this list or library. And we can choose one of those labels that we've created. So I'm in a procurement library. I'm going to just select the statement of work instance here. And this can be applied automatically to everything that's new and put in the library. And if we're doing a backdating project, if you have content in SharePoint that you want it to go back through and actually tag the existing items, you can go through and label the existing items in the library with that as well. So this is already labeled, so I'm just going to hit cancel on this, but I wanted to show that off. So when you go back and look at the recording and you want to push inheritance down to the content in here, that's where you can do that. Now, if you've been with me on a few other webinars, you know that we kind of poke fun at some of the AIM folks because we have a running game of cornhole with them every year at the conference. And I'm going to put in a document here. It can even be a picture. And I know Jess is on the line here. So this was the cornhole game we played with AIM this year at the conference, which Jess, as you know, we won 21-3. So Jess is sitting here in the corner. So Cadence is still the reigning champs here. And this picture is now a record in our system. So this was automatically tagged with the retention label here. And because we've tagged it with the retention label, our rules can pick up later for the events that need to go and perform the disposition of this. So very simple to go set it up at a document library level, have it inherit downwards, have your users say, look, everything related to a contract, an HR personnel file, something put in this location, and let's inherit that downwards. The trick to doing that is setting up that information architecture that works for your departments and your users so that it's a logical place for them to go to put things. And then it's not too restrictive when they put things and documents and records in that location. So I'm going to jump over to the disposition side of things. And we have a disposition already queued up here for major incidents that have occurred in the organization. So anything that's a major incident that we've run through two sources right now, SharePoint and OneDrive. Those are the two sources. And we have about 10 items that are up for disposition. We have the author, the location, and the name of the actual record that's here. If we want to take a preview at this, we can simply select this. You have to select the document name. It's very picky and usually kind of trips us up as well. And I'll load the preview here on the right-hand side. Anything that's in this state is going for approval, and we can, as an administrator, go through and approve the disposal of it, relabel it, extend it, or even add reviewers if we'd like to do this. So if you get a call from legal and they're like, hold up, we're working with a vendor, we're in kind of a legal state here, we're gonna be subpoenaed, whatever it may be, we need to extend this, you can do that. They should also put that on a legal hold, but you can remove it from the disposition here so it doesn't run. Everything that's been disposed of in this state will show here. So we can go and see that this John Doe Excel sheet was permanently deleted. It was approved for deletion by admin at Cadence Demo, and the review started December 6th. So we can kind of go back through that. You can also see in the URL here, this one was actually sitting in the preservation hold library. So it was sitting in that library where the users, if they delete something, it's not deleted in general, it's just deleted from the user and still stored and kept in the preservation hold library. Inside of here, if we want to go through and actually approve a disposal, add reviewers, that's all things you can do right from within here. So we want to add Lee as a reviewer. We can add Lee in. If we want to go ahead and I'll just pick a different one here and actually approve the disposal of one, we can hit the button here as well. Any comments we like will show in the disposition screen, the disposed item screen I was mentioning here, where you'll see the comments here for the item that is now approved for deletion. That one's been in review for quite a while. So I've kind of shown the start, a bit of the middle there in terms of classifying a record, and then the very, very end in terms of post-review when you're going through and disposing an item. There's one other trick I want to show off because I was at an event last week for a Records Management Association, and we started talking about sensitive info types. And even though I've given a portion of this demonstration many times, they were unaware that this was a function that could happen. So I'm going to upload an employee data sheet into an employee's onboarding documents folder. So everybody that onboards here at Cadence, we get a data sheet on them. It contains their emergency contact information, their address, all that kind of stuff. This happens to be under Kyle Lowry's onboarding area. And if I open up this information sheet, right now it's blank. So it's not actually labeled with one of our sensitivity labels that are eligible. So we have PII, confidential, and public. Now you can default those as well for the library and any content you put in. So I'm going to put in a fake SIN number, or social security number. I'm just going to page down here or tab down and type a few things here and let the system pick this up. So within roughly 10 seconds, you'll see that tooltip come across the Word Online section there. It says your organization has automatically applied the sensitivity PII. Now, when it does that, you can go through data loss prevention and do a whole bunch of different things. We can restrict sharing on this document. We can restrict who accesses this document, whether it's the owner, the creator, other people in the actual library that have access. Really, you can fire off all the other rules you want based on pattern detection. This is a built-in feature from 365, and this is a major separator of the Purview stack with sensitivity labels and other record solutions. I've been doing records management projects for about 15 years. This was my moment, my jaw-dropping moment with M365, where it really started to change things. When we can do pattern recognition inside of content on the fly, that gives us a lot better boundaries on our documents and records in terms of the impact and the exposure a user can do with content they shouldn't, because they don't always put it in the right place. But if we can recognize the social security number pattern in a document that's not in the right place, we can still apply some protection. So as we go through that, we can see this image or this document contains sensitive information and some commands are not available. So we have instilled the restrictions on things like sharing, that we're not allowed to go outside the organization now or share this with other individuals because of the sensitivity label. If you want to downgrade the sensitivity label, you can specify that your users need to actually give a reason that it's changing. So if they're going to remove it, you can give them the ability to do that, give them the ability to not do that, and give them a reason if they do want to actually go ahead and remove the sensitivity label. So I know we're coming up on the 30-minute limit there, Nina and Kevin. So I'll maybe flip it back over to you folks. And it looks like there's a ton going on in the Q&A as well. I think you're muted there, Kevin.
Right buttons. That's great.
There we go.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you very much. We do have a ton of questions coming in, Jordan. That is Jordan Uterhagen, Managing Director at Cadence Solutions. But before we get to them, Jordan, how does Cadence help with all of this? What are some next steps and recommendations for us?
So I'll just steal that screen share back from Nina once more. She's jumping the gun on me there. There's a couple things I want to leave the audience with today. Is one, it looks like it's pretty determined from the initial poll, but like one of the actionable steps is determine the license you have, and specifically how many users in the organization have that license. So if you're a organization with field workers, sometimes you'll end up in like an F1 or an F3 stage where you may not get some of the records heavy lifting you need in order to go and perform some of the functions you've seen today. So that's one of the things I wanted to leave or challenge the attendees with. The other one is going through, if you do have access to Purview, go and create a retention label with the Power Automate flow. That's kind of like the king of the castle there, if you can, for going through and doing that records management side of things. So it is one way of proving out your whole approval cycle for dispositioning. And then if you need help up front in some of the creation of those retention labels and hooking those events in, that's something that we may be able to assist with if we hit that stage.
All right, very good. Well, Jordan, we do have a bunch of questions that have come in through the Q&A. I know there's a bunch of chatting going on in the chat as well. So thank you everyone for your engagement today. I'm going to try to get to as many of your questions as we possibly can. Kind of in order of the way they've come to me here. This one coming from Jen Kinsella. Thank you, Jen. Again, about licensing, Jordan. Can you just have an E5 for a handful of people, or do all staff need to have it?
So we asked that question very specifically as well. Glad this is recorded too. We were told that may be a violation of the licensing agreement from Microsoft. So I guess that's something I would get in writing from your Microsoft sales rep. Okay. With that, we've been told that all users need that license for the functions to, I can't say the functions to work, but to be in compliance of that functionality. All
right, very good. Does the system have or manage federal, state, and local citations along with country regulations?
I believe it'll do any citations in there. There's nothing automatically populated in there. It's more of a manual field that you're populating the data inside of.
Okay. This question coming from Elizabeth Johns. Thank you, Elizabeth. What about physical records? We need a system that seamlessly manages paper files and digital files with the same metadata and retention policies.
So if you're going down that path, there isn't a out-of-the-box physical records piece for M365. You're going to want to probably contact one of these three vendors. There's Gimel, there's RecordPoint, and there's AvePoint. I believe all three were at the AIIM conference as well that do offer a physical records, we'll say module or functionality. Two of those offer it within the cloud side of 365 as well.
All right, very good. Getting to more, thank you, Elizabeth. This one from Randy. In disposition review, can you select a group or role instead of an individual? He's thinking about, or they're thinking about staff turnover.
So Sang, I'm going to let you jump in on that because you've configured that piece.
Oh, for sure. So for the disposition review in Microsoft Purview, you can always you can assign a group. So mail enabled security group is what they support. So that as long as you have those like users within that group. If there is a turnover, as long as there's other people within that group, they will be able to perform the review.
All right, very good. Daniel is asking, how do you create adaptive scoops? I'm not familiar with adaptive scoops. How do you create adaptive scoops?
Probably a tabular. It's probably scope, adaptive scope.
Scoops.
So, Dan, do you want to jump in on adaptive scopes?
That's why you're the expert, Jordan. All right.
For sure. So for adaptive scopes, there is the scope section on they just recently moved it from the records management tab to the separate scopes for scopes and roles. And within that place, you can just easily create a new scope. And when you create a new scope, you can define the M365 users or SharePoint sites or whatever the conditions are for that scope, and apply those to the retention policies or label policies so that they are leveraged. Yeah, right there.
What you really need to worry about is the non-adaptive scoops. Those are a problem. All right, thank you. This one coming in from William Stark. Thank you. Per our IT department, MS 365 is not an out-of-the-box enterprise content manager, mainly because of permissions. IT will not grant non-IT employees that do records management. Can you elaborate on these permissions?
So I think we were probably in conflict with IT is getting access to the compliance center or the Purview portal area as a non-IT person. We do get some friction when we come in to do projects on that. I guess, trick or conversation we have with IT is, are you going to manage the records? Are you going to approve the dispositions as they go through? And they immediately back down. Usually they're not up to speed on the number of roles and groups that are non-IT related and can be segregated for records folks. So compliance administrator is one that you can use a lot without having to go and see global admin rights, meaning I shouldn't have the rights to go and deactivate a user, change a password, but I should have the rights to see everything. One of the examples I use with IT a lot is when we go and move from a physical record state of a file room into the electronic side, they always kind of get their hair up and going, well, you shouldn't see everything in records. And I go, well, Sally can walk in your file room and throw her cup of coffee on anything she wants today in the physical records room. So what's the difference in the electronic side? The trust has already been established with the organization and that role in the organization. So you have to trust that when you move to the electronics side of things. So happy to have a conversation with them if I could help you push that the way you need it to go. But I've been through that quite a number of times.
Can permissions be set to restrict who can add and change retention labels on items?
Yes.
Enid asks, can retention labels be applied to shared drives?
I don't believe they can go down to shared drives. Sang, I think you can chime in. I believe we can do some of that with the sensitivity side, but I'm not sure on the record side.
That is correct. So on the sensitivity side, there is a way, but not on the record side at the moment.
Dulcie says, so a preservation hold is not visible to a user? Is that correct?
In order to view the preservation hold library, so it is a library within your SharePoint site. It's just, I believe, your SharePoint site URL/preservation hold library, then you can actually access it. But unless you're the site owner, you will not be able to see it.
Mary's asking if disposal requires certification. Can I guess asking, can we create a template?
A template, are we maybe to Mary, is that more of a destruction certificate? Are we looking like post-destruction? You want to see what was destroyed, or is it going through? I know, like, I'll give an example. We work with, some agencies that have to go through, they're public bodies that have to go through state approval. So they have to fill out a specific form with the list of records to obtain the approval from the state before they're allowed to go through a destruction cycle. So there isn't a way of doing that with the Purview side of things. That's where you go more to the Power Automate Flow side of things and have it generate a document that would list all the records. Then you would submit that off to a regulatory body to obtain approval.
She said yes, destruction. Mary got back to us and said yes, destruction.
So if it's post-destruction, what we would run is actually a Power BI report that would produce a certificate that we would then create a PDF of and store that in another records area in SharePoint as proof of destruction of the records that went through the cycle.
All right.
So it is a gap. It is a little bit of a gap in the solution right now.
Okay. We are here today with Jordan Uterhagen, Managing Director of Cadence Solutions. We're talking about records management in Microsoft 365 and using Microsoft Purview. Please keep your questions coming in. Now's our chance to grab Jordan while we have him. This question here coming in from Ben. Are you able to customize the policy tips shown at the top of the Word doc?
Yes, you are. Yeah, that's an easy one. I'll see if I can grab an example of that quickly.
Great.
And I guess while Jordan's grabbing that, I can answer Tyler's question about how long will a record sit in the preservation hold library. It will sit as long for the retention period that you have set up for that label.
All right. Do you have that for us, Jordan?
Just working on it. One too many clicks.
Yeah.
I'll go on to the next one there, Kevin. And
all right. Well,
up.
while you're bringing that up, please do. I think that's a good example. Now, Jen Coast, thank you, Jen, is asking, do you have any information about how SharePoint does with long-term preservation, or should we plan on using another system like Preservica?
That one I'm going to have to take offline. Not overly familiar with Preservica. So if you want to shoot me an email, Jen, I'll put my contact info up at the end. And
what are the issues with long-term in SharePoint? Should we have any concerns about really, longer-term preservation?
The one we hear a lot of is cost and volume. So
okay.
If you have terabytes of terabytes, there's based on your licensing model, there's limits. And when you surpass those limits, it starts to accelerate. Now, they are working, we're under some NDA stuff here, so I can't say too much, but they are working on different licensing models and products to archive things out of SharePoint at a lower cost.
That is an important thing to consider in your plans. If you have plans for very long-term preservation, that should be part of the strategy that you're thinking of now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That cost model, you do need that good relationship with IT as they go and negotiate the next, licensing agreement with Microsoft on what your AIIM plans are. If you're going to go and onboard a bunch of backfile scanning, or you found a dusty file share that you have to migrate in, it's going to drive those volumes up and can put you into a different cost model.
Kevin is asking, for those event-driven retention periods, does Microsoft 365 have an API to different systems? In other words, for example, Workday to populate term date of employee, for an example?
Yeah, we've done that stuff in the past, Kevin. What we'll utilize is, I guess to cover the HR scenario, is if all the documents for an employee are going to be stored in SharePoint, it will be when does the doc set or area get created for that employee. So that is the hook to Workday or Dayforce or whatever the HR system is, in order to pull that information out. That can be done with the Power Platform, and create the appropriate container for Jordan, the employee, and all the documentation to go in there. So yes, it's possible, but there's a when do you trigger the storage aspect? Usually it's upon either acceptance of a job. Some even do with candidates. They want every candidate to have an area where they can store content.
Daniel asks, is it possible to auto-apply a retention label by applying one or more managed metadatas to items?
I'll let Sang jump in on that one.
Yes, so you can, for sure. So for the auto apply policy, you can leverage what is called a keyword querying language within Microsoft, that you can use those managed metadata as a condition for your query to apply them. So yes.
Okay. Isaac is asking about workflow. Do you have any information on creating workflows in SharePoint, especially workflows around approvals? Does your organization provide this service?
So yes, we do that. It's through the Power Platform, Isaac. So I'm going to put up some contact information here at the end, or maybe one of my colleagues can type in my email address in there. But we can help you with that if you're looking for that. But it's essentially now been carved out of SharePoint and moved to the Power Platform by Microsoft.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for your questions today. We have just only a minute or two left. Before we go, Jordan, does Purview link to generative AI tools? And if so, how are they applied to information governance?
So our second part of this series, so that would have been in March, talked about Syntex from Microsoft. That is going to be their generative AI tool. They're adding a plethora of products underneath that brand that will do things like content assembly, meaning generate, for us older folks, glorified mail merging, right? You're creating a bunch of letters en masse or something like that. And that will be connected with Purview as well, where it can actually identify the contents of the document, flag it appropriately with the retention label, sensitivity label, and anything downstream we need. So we're actually going to utilize Syntex a lot for the migration side of things.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, Jordan. That is Jordan Uterhagen, Managing Director of Cadence Solutions. This has been the third in a three-part series with Cadence. If you haven't seen part 1 and part 2 yet, you can do so by looking it up on the AIIM site, and I'm sure that Nina and the rest of the AIIM team will pop that into the chat feature as well. But for now, I'd like to thank Jordan for being our guest expert today. Thank you, Jordan. It's been great.
Thank you, Kevin. That's a set now with 3. So we look forward to seeing what's next for us and
Nice.
presenting with AIIM.
All right. Well, with that, let's turn it back over to Nina. Nina, you have some news about the new industry watch report coming out from AIIM.
Absolutely, everyone. So if you haven't heard already, AIIM has released their 2023 Industry Watch Report, and we use user-generated intelligence to uncover the realities of post-pandemic information management and its impact on current industry and economic forces. The key findings in the report point to a number of opportunities for next-generation success and several roadblocks to getting there. Don't get left behind, so download your copy today for the latest independent findings and 3 essential recommendations from AIIM. As we bring this webinar to a close, just the last few minute reminders, we have recorded this webinar so you can catch anything you want to hear again in a recap email that will be sent within 24 hours. A link to the resources for this webinar was put in the chat. You'll find a copy of this presentation as well as additional resources through that link. And also, don't forget to take our feedback survey and let us know how we did. Before we say our final goodbyes, I'd like to ask Jordan if he has any last minute remarks or comments regarding this wonderful 3-part series.
I'd love to hear the feedback on it. It really doesn't matter what I think now. It's all over. So looking forward to seeing what the feedback is and if there's any topics of interest for the future. We like to show the system working as opposed to talk about it working. So challenge us with a scenario you're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely. And what about you, Kevin?
Well, it's been a great session as always. Look, Microsoft 365 is ubiquitous across industries. We see a ton of interest here in it today. The question has always been, does it really give me the records management capabilities that I need, and how do I do that effectively? And this session has shown us that it may indeed be possible to have a complete program. So thank you, Jordan and the team, for bringing this great information to us.
Absolutely. A big thank you to our sponsor again, Cadence Solutions, for a wonderful, informative webinar. Thank you, everyone. Till next time.